SI, and I'm reviewing the Fuji X-T2. The reason why I kind of decided that I needed to review this camera was because it fits in this weird niche of right around the Sony a6300 and between my a7S. So just to give you background on my experience, I'm coming from the a7S background. So I'm used to a full frame, I'm used to low light, I'm used to a really good EVF, and I'm used to that 5-axis image stabilization that's built into the camera. So one thing to say about this camera, I didn't review this camera for the purpose of deciding that this would be an equivalent or better. I was trying to look for a price-effective camera that offers similar features to what the a7S features. And this camera is pretty close to that, and that's why I looked at those specs. But I wanted to look at it as a subjective point of view rather than this very scientific terminology type of camera, because as we know, all cameras have a certain characteristic that we all prefer or we like. So I'm in no way, shape or form like endorsed by Fujifilm or any of that stuff, or Sony. I'm simply a guy who's just trying to find what can work for the best tool for the best job. So what I've kind of determined with this camera, and I'm not gonna go super lengthy into the exact things that are going on with this, like all the shutter controls and stuff. You can look at other people's reviews too, because I've looked at them, and certainly a lot of people are going really in depth with this stuff. But I kind of wanted to go into like the things that, as an A7S user, that I think that would be great things that would be implemented in the A7S that they can learn from Fuji, but also just the fact that they've thought about different things that the A7 hasn't thought about, and why I would look at this opposed to like as A6300 or A6500 that just came out. One thing that I really like is this viewfinder button. The one frustrating thing with the A7S is the fact that when you shoot with an A7S, they have that monitor change with the sensor. This is the button that turns it off. Okay, you just flick this off and flick it on, and it turns on and off. The problem with the A7S is you need to go through the menu to turn that sensor off, which is lengthy and it's time consuming. If I can just push this button and be like, okay, well, now I'm looking through the monitor. Oh wait, I just want to look through the viewfinder. All I have to do is push this button, view mode. You know, this is definitely something that Sony would be great to implement because their menus are not so great. That is one thing I have noticed about the Fuji, is that I like the simplicity of the menu. Really straightforward, easy things to use. In Sony, it's kind of laid across. It shows like the icons, but the way it's set is horizontally. This is done vertically. And also it's really quick to see everything that's in there because they don't pack into like 8 subsections into one menu spot, which is the frustrating thing about a Sony menu layout. So everything is really straightforward. The movie mode is really straightforward. You see your movie mode, you see your AF mode, and then you see all that stuff. The film aspect is all in one spot, but then if you're gonna do the color, for example, it's all in this IQ menu where it's really quick and easy to see. That was another reason why I really was drawn to checking out the Fuji, is that what I do in processing with my Sony color is I put it through like Magic Bullet film, and then they have film presets, and I use the Fuji film preset a lot. So if the Fuji film is already built into the sensor and you can kind of pick your different styles like Provia, Velvia, Astia, Classic Chrome. I personally like Classic Chrome the most because it's kind of like a neutral color profile. I think that's really an awesome advantage. Now, the thing about this though is that there's no log color profile dedicated to the internal recording. Which is kind of frustrating because like on the A7S, I have S-Log2, or S-Log3, which I can internally record to a card. Now it's usually not advised to do that, but if you're at low ISOs and you don't bump it, it's pretty good. But right now they don't have it. But I imagine that Fujifilm, because they're very up on their firmware ideas, that they might implement the F-log that they have into the internal recording capabilities of the camera. On that note, one thing I was discovering is I was trying to use this HDMI out to see the images onto my small HD 702 monitor, but it wouldn't send out. However, when I used an Atomos Shogun and a Pix 420, I could be wrong about that. It's a Pix though. I would use those and I would get the signal. The Pix was only in 1080 422 recorder, but the Shogun was a 4K. And you can look into my demos of it. I'll show you what the 4K 422 image looks like on the F-log. The little screen on here is not very accurate. If you're gonna use anything to gauge the lighting, you wanna use your waveforms on here or RGB Parade. This is, and if you can see, this is the autofocus unit working. Watch this. Boom. Boom. I think the F-log looks pretty good. I'm pretty impressed with it. I'm really impressed with it. I think that if you are gonna get this camera, you should know that the 702 doesn't work with it for whatever reason. I don't know why. I looked it up, I researched, I could not figure out why. So I guess there's just some monitors that aren't compatible, and I think that Fuji should definitely disclose that. If not, I could be corrected, so I'm leaving this open for anybody who has information on this. But I think that doing the external 4K is a really good perk. And one thing I was definitely concerned about when looking at it and saying, like, this could be a deal breaker for me. Another important thing, I tested the 4K wobble to see if there's rolling shutter. One of the big problems with the 6300 is that in 4K recording mode, you get this nasty wobble when you shake your camera. As I've seen on this, it doesn't do that. Also, another cool feature that I was going to talk about is the screen, and this is another thing about, like, kind of similar to the view mode, is that it does the exact same thing as an A7 where it articulates like this. But what it does here is it folds out as such. Now, they initially did this because they wanted to do low mode if you're shooting low, or if you're shooting high and then you're shooting up like this. But for me, I actually, and I'll show you in the demo I did with this with an interview, I held it like this and I was doing an interview and I could monitor my monitor while I was shooting the interview. It wasn't flat like on the A7 where I'm like, oh, I can't even see what's going on. So it's a good one-man band solution for an interview on the screen. So I don't think they even thought about that, but it's a pleasant surprise. Okay, so during that interview process, what I learned about the camera that's really important is that you can't, it's not like a C100 autofocus system. I treated it like such because at work I use them. I set a focus point on my subject. And as you can see in the footage, the camera likes to hunt a lot. Even when there's a good stark contrast, as you can see in the image, he's popping out with the lights on him, and then in the background, I mean, it's sort of bright, but it's not as bright. It's a couple stops lower. But it makes this weird hunting visual that you can see. So that was not so great. So I recommend, if you're gonna shoot interviews with this, just set it to manual and set it at a higher aperture at like maybe f5, f4, and make sure that your subject is always in focus. That way it's not gonna hunt in and out. And as you can see, they said that there's no aliasing happening in their image. In the shirt, you can kind of see a little bit of it. It happens, but it's really not that noticeable comparatively to some other cameras. So I think that they really did a good job of this. And the reason that it's good at this is because how it shoots is it shoots 6K, it shoots from the full 6K image, and then it drops from that 6K image to a 4K image. So it's down-resing from the 6K to the 4K. This, with the low light, is good. I would say it's pretty good. It goes 6400 and it's usable. I think when you go the next notch up, I think it can kind of get unbearable, but the good thing about this is because it's got film emulation principles to it, the noise looks more like film grain, opposed to nasty grain. Like if you turn up like an ISO on an A7 or an A6300, you start to know these blue spectral things that are popping into your image, which are really gross and nasty. There's no such thing as this. It's in the Fuji, it's more of like a consistent grain that gets worse. So there's no weird blue artifacts. And that's another great strong point about this camera, is that the color handling. In skin tones and just vividness of color, period, I think it performs better than my A7. It tends to warm them a little bit more than the A7 tends to cool them. And I think that's the color science behind how it works. And after using different cameras, I use Canons, I use Sonys, I've used Nikon before. I think it's a good analogy of the Fuji color is it's like a hybrid between Nikon and Canon. And then what they decided to do with their form factor is they decided to go to a smaller form factor. So they fit this niche of that color science into this area. I feel like this is definitely a market that Canon didn't really fully explore. They did it with their EOS M, but they decided to kind of back off of it and just continue on their mirror line. And I think that was kind of a missed opportunity. Nikon doesn't do it either. They have mirrorless cameras, but they're not really flagship important cameras to them. This is a flagship important camera, and they're really starting to explore that in the video. That being said, I think that there are some things that aren't necessarily perfect with this yet. I think that the way that you change exposures during shooting is not very great. I think that if you're gonna shoot event with this, I don't think event is this is a good event camera, like shooting parties or weddings or any of that stuff. I think it's a good cinematographer camera because you have a lot of the aperture rings, you have the shutter dials, you have the ISO dials, you got a lot of customization in here, as well as you can change the hue shift from like magenta, green, blue, wherever you need to move it. So if you have a light meter and you know what the color is of that light with the fluorescence or something, you can match it almost perfectly. But another little small thing in that, you can't dial in exactly what Kelvin you want. So it goes like 5900 and then it goes like 6100. It won't allow you to get to like 6,000 exactly, or any precise number like on my C100s or the A7S, which goes by 100 increments. So if you really want a good white balance with this camera, you really got to get a white balance card, hit it, set it, and get it right to that point. Other than that, I think that after all doing all this stuff with this camera, I think it's really great for its first round. I think that there's some improvements that need to be done, mainly with just like the ergonomics of the exposure controls and tuning that when you're shooting. But other than that, I think it's on a good road, and I think that things that they could add that would definitely turn it up against the competition is like what Sony has, is a 5-axis image stabilization, better low light, and then of course making those the HDMI signal go out to all the monitors successfully. I think that that's a simple firmware upgrade that could be possibly implemented, so I don't think that's necessarily a problem with the body. The other thing is I would like to see the headphone monitoring jack in the actual camera. I think that it's kind of, I wouldn't like to say it a cheap move, but I think it's a cheap move sort of to make that feature only available in the grip, which makes you have to buy it. But at the same time, there's a caveat about it, which is with the regular battery, you get 10 minutes of shooting time, but with the grip, you get 30 minutes of shooting time when it comes to 4K, which is really great because my A7 doesn't do that. It like burns out. I've been having heating issues sometimes. As my overall review of this, I think that it's a great thing to dive into if you haven't bought like an A7S like myself. The reason why I might not go to it because of like the image stabilization, the fact that I have to get into a new lens line. I kind of, everyone as a photographer or videographer gets stressed out about like selling off their lenses and buying a whole new set and trying to get into a new series. But yeah, the lenses on these are great. You're not compromising quality from moving to a different system. And I think that they're definitely taking steps in the right direction and listening to their customers. So I would suggest that it wouldn't be a bad camera unit to go into. Again, it's all about preference. It's all about the qualities that you like in the camera. And I think this definitely supports a lot of things that I like about a camera system for video.